In a quiet neighborhood on an otherwise ordinary evening, a routine encounter spiraled into a moment that shook the community. A black man, calmly walking home, found himself face to face with an officer whose actions would spark a wave of questions. The body camera footage reveals a chilling escalation, voices rising, movements becoming tense. What started as a simple conversation soon transformed into a confrontation many feel crossed the line. In this story, we'll explore the moments that led to this critical turning point. Who was the man behind the badge? Who was the man on the receiving end of that force? And how did it come to this? This isn't just about one incident, it's about a system, perceptions, and the way stories like this ripple through families, communities, and the nation. Stay tuned as we unravel the events and emotions behind this tense encounter. The officer involved was a seasoned member of the force, known for his strict demeanor and commitment to upholding the law. But questions had surfaced before, complaints from others in the community, whispers of heavy-handed tactics. On the other side was Marcus, a quiet man in his early 30s, working 2 jobs to support his family. He wasn't a stranger to this neighborhood. He'd lived there all his life. That night, he was simply walking home after a long shift, headphones in, lost in thought. What happened next remains a point of debate. The officer claimed Marcus matched the description of someone involved in a recent theft, but Marcus insisted he had done nothing wrong. As tension grew, witnesses began to gather, some recording the interaction on their phones. The confusion and raised voices painted a chaotic scene, but what truly happened in those critical moments? The truth, it seems, lies in fragments waiting to be pieced together. As the crowd grew, so did the tension. Marcus, trying to stay calm, asked repeatedly what he had done wrong, his voice steady but edged with frustration. The officer, now visibly agitated, demanded that Marcus remove his hands from his pockets, though Marcus had already done so. People in the crowd murmured uneasily, their phone cameras capturing every word, every movement. Some whispered among themselves, questioning why things seemed to be escalating so quickly for what appeared to be a misunderstanding. From a distance, an older woman who had lived in the neighborhood for decades watched with a heavy heart. She had seen moments like this before, too many times to count, and feared how it might end. At the same time, the officer's partner, standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably, his expression unreadable. Did he agree with the way this was unfolding, or was he silently hoping someone would intervene? Everyone was bracing for what would come next. The air felt heavier with each passing second, the tension thick enough to be felt by everyone watching. Marcus, still standing his ground, raised his hands slightly to show he posed no threat, his voice calm but firm as he insisted he had done nothing wrong. The officer's hand hovered near his holster, a subtle but alarming movement that caused a ripple of concern in the crowd. Voices in the background grew louder, some calling for calm, others pleading with the officer to de-escalate. Marcus's heart pounded, but he refused to look away, determined not to appear guilty of something he hadn't done. The officer, seemingly interpreting Marcus's defiance as a challenge, took a step closer, his tone sharp and commanding. A voice from the crowd shouted, "He's not doing anything, just let him go." Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, everything changed. A single movement, a misunderstanding, set off a chain of reactions that no one could stop. As the situation teetered on the edge of chaos, a voice from the far side of the crowd called out, "Wait, check the camera." All eyes turned to a young man holding a small tablet, his hands shaking as he stepped forward. "I have footage," he said, pointing toward a nearby storefront. He explained that the store's security camera had been recording the street all night and might show what Marcus had been doing before the officer stopped him. The officer hesitated, his expression unreadable. The crowd buzzed with tension, the possibility of clarity now within reach. But before anyone could act on the new information, backup patrol cars arrived, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows across the scene. More officers stepped out, assessing the standoff with uncertainty. One of them approached Marcus and the officer, but instead of calming the situation, their presence seemed to heighten the stakes. The crowd grew restless, emotions running high. Would the footage be seen, or would this moment spiral even further out of control? As the young man with the tablet nervously approached, one of the officers motioned for him to hand it over. The officer who had confronted Marcus hesitated, his rigid stance faltering for a brief moment. The crowd fell silent as the video played, a clear, steady image of Marcus walking down the street, his hands in his pockets, no signs of wrongdoing. The officer's reasoning for stopping him began to crumble before everyone's eyes. Just as the tension seemed to break, a voice from the crowd, a man Marcus didn't recognize, stepped forward. "I'm the one they're looking for," he admitted, raising his hands. The confession sent a wave of shock through the onlookers. The officer's partner looked visibly shaken, as if realizing the confrontation had spiraled needlessly. While the officers redirected their attention, Marcus stood frozen. Relief began to set in, but so did frustration and disbelief at how close he'd come to disaster. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving behind questions about accountability, bias, and what might have happened if the truth had stayed hidden. As the officers led the real suspect away, Marcus stood quietly, still processing what had just happened. People from the crowd approached him, some offering apologies, others expressing their anger at how quickly things had escalated. The young man with the tablet placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, saying, "I'm glad we caught it. I'm sorry you had to go through this." Marcus nodded, his voice soft as he thanked him. The officer who confronted Marcus didn't say much as he walked away, but his partner lingered for a moment, as if wanting to say something before turning to follow. The night's tension began to dissolve, but its impact lingered. Later, Marcus returned home, holding his family a little closer that night. The incident became a spark for conversations in the community about justice, accountability, and the power of speaking up. For Marcus, it was a reminder of resilience in the face of adversity.